stuck in Philadelphia. There's an electrical storm and somebody's at the airport. He's not going to be able to make it tonight. So I would just like to welcome you all and thank you all for coming. I won't speak, I have a cold, I won't speak as long or as loud as Bernie. And I would just like to take this opportunity to say that it's an honor and a privilege to be here with Pete Seeger, and to thank you all for sharing this night with us. And we'd like to start it with a song.
My grandson Tao and I are glad to be here and glad to lend our support to Bernie's campaign. I guess you know that there's millions of people in this country have given up voting at all. It's all politics, doesn't just talk, and what needs to be done never gets done. I don't think it's quite as simple as that, because the people who don't vote don't all agree. Some want this to be done, some want that to be done. A friend of mine was in Holland, and the Dutchman says, "Oh, you Americans, you have just one more political party than the Russians." We have 12. And I decided they're right. We need lots of small political parties. Some of them may be local, some of them may be more national. People gradually learn that history moves by means of coalitions. And what we need to do is put together new coalitions that have never been put together, between the people who thought they were conservative and people who thought they were radical, people who thought they were in favor of one kind of freedom and people who thought they were in favor of another kind of freedom. But in this crisis that the whole world is facing now, I see a consensus approaching. A woman wrote me from Lebanon. She says, "Every woman I know is furious at young men with guns who think they are going to solve the problems of their world or their country or their people with more shooting." And the voices of people like Bernie are going to be heard more and more and more in the next few years, as the clucks down in Washington think the way they'll solve the situation is to get us into another military adventure. Boom, boom, boom. Tao and I just thought we'd lead off on a song that a lot of you know. It was written by a Canadian, Ed McCurdy. Last night I had the strangest dream. I've never dreamed before. Can you sing it? Let's hear it. Last night I had the strangest dream I ever dreamed. People dream the world, they all dream. I dreamed the world and all was everyone. Dreams I saw in a mighty room. I dreamed I saw in my filled with women and men. Filled with women and men. Paper they were signing, and the paper they were signing. That they never fight again. They never fight again. And the papers all signing. And when copies made, and a million copies made, all joined hands and bowed their heads. They all joined hands and bowed their heads. If the prayers were prayed, people in the streets below, and the people in the streets dancing round and round. Swords and guns and uniforms, and swords and guns and uniforms, scattered on the ground, were scattered on the ground. I saw a strange dream. think we're going to have to learn Bernie's great sense of humor. Actually, the gods above must be laughing at stupid things. We got the technology in the world for everybody in this world to be fed, for everybody to have a roof over their head, and even education now becomes cheaper, believe it or not, in the sense that electronic communication is making things possible which were not possible before. And we're going to see people all around the world doing things which were never done in any previous decade, getting in touch with each other, communicating with each other. Admittedly, there's going to be lots of screwy things going on. I don't have a guitar here. Do you think we'd sing the Ross Perot guy? Calvin Trillin in The Nation wrote a poem, and I put a tune to it. And we sang it with great success, Tal and I, for 3 weeks. And then the reason for our song dropped out of his own particular race. But we decided we'd keep on singing it anyway because it's a lesson to politicians in general. Mike Royko once said, you liberals, you're against the death penalty. And Royko says, no, I'm in favor of the death penalty for politicians who fib. Anyway, this song was originally known as the Ross Perot Guide to Answering Embarrassing Questions.
When something in my history is found which contradicts the views that I propound, or shows that I perhaps am not the guy I claim to be, here's what I usually do. I lie. I simply, boldly falsify. I look the other feller in the eye and just deny. I lie. I don't apologize, not me instead. I say I never said the things I said, nor did the things some people saw me do when confronted with some things they know are true. I simply boldly falsify. I look the other feller in the eye and just deny. I hate those weasel words some slickies use to blur their past or muddy up their views. Not me, I'm blunt. One thing that makes me great, and one more reason I should be head of state. I simply boldly falsify. I look the other feller in the eye and just deny.
Well, it's a very serious thing. If we don't wise rise up to what's going on in the entire world. The starvation, the inequality, the desperation. This world won't make it. You know that. Some of us well-fed and some of us not fed at all. And you look at TV, imagine with two anchor people. And you've heard of Miller Lite, you've heard of Dairy Queen Light, and so on. One anchor person says, "Do you feel bloated from taking in too many fats? Try our News Light edition."
I don't know.
That's right. All the excitement with only half the information. One satisfied customer said,
I can watch all I want, and I don't gain any information.
"My worldview got so big I couldn't fit into any of my old preconceptions." Try News Light today. Before we go, let's just sing a good old song, because remember that been people who are desperate and they found a way to hang on. Sometimes it was an old story out of an old book, and they made it live again. If I could, I surely would stand on the rock where Moses stood.
Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep.
Oh, Mary,
Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep.
God gave Noah the rainbow sign. No more water. Next time.
Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep.
Moses stood on the Red Sea shore, smoting the water with a 2-by-4.
Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you weep. One more time. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Oh, Mary, don't you weep, don't you mourn. Pharaoh's army got drowned. Oh, Mary, don't you
Seymour, he has been an inspiration for generations and generations to come. I know many of you out there share my experience of strumming a guitar and singing the songs around the house when the kids are little, and all the way through until they're grown up and they start singing them to their own kids and or in long car rides. As Pete was saying, politicians in Washington and everywhere have to wake up, and he has done with his music. He has brought with his music the values that many of us in this room share. He's brought to people around the globe. People are very using the term family values all the time now. It seems to be the in issue. And they're talking about rules and responsibilities and obligations. And yeah, there's that. But what Pete Seeger has brought to all of us in all my life, and hopefully all through my children's lives, are values, family values that bring the spirit and the joy of family and of togetherness, and not just the nuclear family, but the family of people striving together, whether in a union or in a movement, working for change, trying to better the world rather than their own state of well-being. And I just want to thank Pete Seeger for sharing this night with us, and for helping Bernie through all his years. This is not the first time Mr. Seeger has come up to support Bernie. And our daughter Heather has a couple of presents for Pete, and Heather organized the entire event tonight, so. Jim Schumacher would just like to say a few words now. Jim has been working with Bernie for the last, since he got elected on the campaign, actually to get him elected on this and almost every other campaign, and now he's working in the campaign instead of the congressional office. Jim Schumacher?
Thanks, I'll be brief, and I won't pretend I'm Bernie, who I'm supposedly substituting for, who was really, really, really disappointed he cannot be here. I talked to him just before I left to come down here. Trapped in an airport for 6 hours, never got off the ground. They shut down the Washington airport. That's normally good news. Not this time. I think about 2 years ago, many of us really began to get the idea that maybe we were going to do it. Some of us didn't catch on until later in the campaign, but I think many of us really began to, I think maybe we're going to do it this time, especially those of us that have been through the 1988 campaign. It was so close. 88 campaign. 98 campaign, that's a few years away. We knew we were going to do it in 1998, and I know a lot of people started to say, well, what's it going to mean, having Bernie in Congress? What's the big deal? He's just one guy. What's one guy going to do down there? What's the difference? So if I could, I want to tell you, from my perspective, working in the congressional office for the last year and a half and then moving on to the campaign, why it's important, what a difference it's made to have one independent progressive in Congress. And I think maybe the most important thing we've done is the stuff that you never read about in the newspapers, that you'll never hear on the press, because it's not important to the Tom Brokaws of the world. And that's, we're building coalitions. And that's, I think, what Pete was talking about. That's what we've got to do. You look around this room, that's what we've got to do. We've got to bring people together. And that is the biggest achievement we've done. Bernie went down to Congress and found that, we always hear how bad it is. Bernie comes back, he always tells us how bad it is. But he also adds, there's really some good people down there. There's about 30 or 40 excellent congressional people. You don't know most of them. You know some of them. Some of you have probably heard, most people in this room have heard of Ron Dellums. Most of you have heard of Maxine Waters. But you haven't heard of a lot of other people like Lane Evans and Charlie Rangel. And they got together, Bernie and Ron Dellums, last winter, and they formed something called the House Progressive Caucus. So instead of the Democratic Leadership Council, there's now another group called the House Progressive Caucus. And they work together. And I think their major achievement, pretty significant achievement for the first year, is they put in their own budget. So those of you who follow Congress probably know that every year the House Congressional Black Caucus has been putting in a budget for years and years and years. And it's always much better than the Democrats' budget. It's always much better, needless to say, than the Republicans' budget. It usually doesn't get debated. It usually never gets to the floor. The House Progressive Caucus said, why is this a black budget? Why isn't this everybody's budget? This is a budget for people. So this year, the House Congressional Black Caucus and the House Progressive Caucus worked together, and they presented what they called an alternative budget of hope. and it said, we can cut military spending. The Cold War's over. We can cut military spending right now. We can do it. We can reinvest in America. We can put people to work. We don't have to throw people out in the street. We can solve homelessness. These are not insoluble problems. We can do all those things. And they presented it. And every year, there's a lot of hoopla. The president presents his budget, and then the Democratic Leadership Council, essentially the centrist Democrats, present their budget. And it makes a lot of news. There's a lot of going back and forth. Well, what you don't know is that neither the president and his party or the Democrats thought enough of their budgets that they wanted to get down and debate it, that they wanted anybody to have a serious discussion about it. So there was only one budget that was presented and had a debate on the House floor, and that was the House Alternative Budget. And it was debated for a full day, which by congressional standards is a long time, 8-hour debate. And it was very interesting. You had people like Bernie debating Newt Gingrich. And for one of the rare times in Washington, there was substantive, serious debate about the future of this country, about competing visions for what the future of this country is. And make no mistake about it, what we stand for, what we're fighting for, is diametrically opposed to what's been ruling the country for the last 12 years. We're running against people, and we're opposing people who believe, who tell the world that government is terrible and government is evil, and of course what they do is they slash government programs, they slash aid to housing, they slash everything, and then they say, see, government doesn't work. It's awful. And what we're saying is, no, we can do better than that. So that budget was debated. Now, it only got 77 votes, right? That sounds probably pretty bad. 77 votes? That's more than the president's budget got. Twice as many votes as the president's budget. So that, I think, is what we see we want to keep doing in Congress. There's a tremendous opportunity. It's almost cliche at this point that there's going to be big turnover in Congress this year. Well, it's going to happen. We're losing track of how many of these folks don't want to come back, but it's up over 85. And simple math says, looking at the districts a lot of these people are not returning from, we're going to have a lot more women, we're going to have a lot more Hispanics, a lot more people of color. That only can mean good things. So I think probably what we want to go back down there and do very much is make that House Progressive Caucus even stronger. Because especially if there's a change in the White House, it's going to be very important that we have progressive voice and a progressive block of legislators leading the charge on things like single-payer national health care, on things like really reinvesting in America, and things like really asking the wealthy to start paying their fair share, those kind of things. So that's probably the number one reason why I tell you you need to help us go back to Congress from a national standpoint. And let me tell you why it's important from a Vermont standpoint. And I think the answer is right here. Because what we're trying to do here is what people all over the country are looking to for future, for direction. We get calls every day in Washington and in Burlington, and they're from people that had given up. They had said, forget it, you can't do anything to the political system, it's a waste of time. You can't make any change. And they're calling up now and they're saying, how did you do it? What do you got up there in Vermont? You got some kind of magic dust or something like that? How is it you people elected this guy to Congress? And now I understand you're running all kinds of progressive candidates and they're winning at the local level. How do you do it? You organize. You bring people together. You say that basically we agree on 90% of the issues and we're going to work together. We might disagree here and there, but basically we all agree that we can make a country and a state and a government that serves our interests, not the interests of the wealthy and the powerful. And we're succeeding. And it's important that we keep on succeeding, that we grow, and that we use this campaign to grow. And I think for me, I get to go around with Bernie a lot around the state. And it's really interesting, and I think Pete Seeger said it better than I can, but you see people when Bernie gets to talk to them, when he goes and talks to veterans groups, right? A group that supposedly, groups of people that wouldn't be very responsive to our message. I got news for you. They listen, they hear, they agree. You go out and you talk to high school kids. You go out and you talk to unionized workers. You go out and talk to all the people that supposedly are not supposed to agree with what we're trying to do. They're all part of our coalition, and we've got to keep doing that. And one of the most valuable things that we've been able to do in Vermont, that Bernie's been able to do, is go out and meet people and talk to them and explain to them what's going on and how it's their government and it's their chance to be involved and to grow. And we've got to keep doing that. And I'll finish with just one note. One of the things we want to do exciting, I hope, in this campaign is more than just distribute the literature and more than just run the TV ads and all that kind of stuff. We want to bring people together like this. We want to hold some rallies down the stretch the last few weeks where we get a couple hundred people out in some towns like St. Johnsbury, where it's never been allowed to be said out loud that you would vote for somebody like Bernie Sanders. We want people to look around the room and say, oh, how many people just came to the thing we did in January, where we had 800 people at the Sheraton? Remember the feeling of walking into that room and saying, wow, there's a lot of other people in this state who feel the same way I do. We're not alone. We're growing. We're building. And that's what we're going to do in this campaign. And so that's why we need your help tonight, and that's what we did in the fall. And I want to thank you all very much for coming.
A couple of other people, Ethel Atar and her daughter Jasmine and the rest of their family who run the 1810 farmhouse and the depot have done a wonderful job with the food and with everything, the organization. As I said, our daughter Heather Driscoll this was her first major event and she's pretty excited about it. So now everybody just have fun, eat, and just mingle. Thanks very much for coming.